Greetings to everyone. This is Charles Upton. I'm doing this recording as a way of thanking those people who have made contributions to my GoFundMe campaign, which is set up to help me deal with medical expenses and other pressing expenses. You look at GoFundMe and they say it's always nice to have a way of saying thank you to those people who have contributed. So this is my way of doing that. And this is actually a fairly long 27-page. We'll see if I could do this in one sitting. Collection of writings that I call Metaphysics for Hard Times, 10 Meditations on the Majesty of God. And some of these were written quite a while ago. It's to be known by the unknowable, for example, was written quite a few years ago. It was published in Parabola magazine, whereas the last thing, which is called The Final Blessing, I wrote a couple of weeks ago. But I realized they're all the same genre. They haven't quite found places in my other published books. But thrown all together, they're not quite enough for a book, or what I consider to be a book. So I decided to make a recording out of them. But right now, this is only being sent to those people who contributed to my GoFundMe campaign. So let's see if I can get this all done in a single sitting. Might not be able to, but we will see if it works. Okay. 10 Meditations on the Majesty of God, entitled Metaphysics for Hard Times. And, okay, here we go. So the first meditation, number 1, is called The Reason for Darkness. Starts with a quote from the Quran. And Dulnun, when he went away in anger and thought we had no power over him, he cried out from the darkness, "There is no God but you, all glory to you. I have been one of the transgressors." Then we heard his prayer and saved him from his anguish. Thus do we deal with believers. That's Quran 21, 87 to 88. The reason for darkness. The sole reason for spiritual darkness is to learn to see and know God in that darkness. If you make your bed in hell, behold, I am there, says Psalm 139. It is easy to see him in the light, but if you can see him in the darkness, then you have come to the deepest seeing. His light shone in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. The sole purpose of suffering is to know the joy of love in the midst of suffering. This is the deepest love, a love which is only possible if we know all love is from God and to God. I was a hidden treasure who loved to be known, so I created the universe that I might be known, says the Hadith Qudsi. This is the entire reason for the creation and assumption of the veil for human birth into this world. There is even a station at which evil and darkness and suffering are understood as the crucible, the necessary limit that allows or even forces the presence of God in the spiritual heart to deepen and concentrate until it becomes incandescent, thereby opening a door to a world where evil and darkness and suffering can never come. Here we can see how gratitude to the All-Merciful for everything that he sends, light or darkness, is not a case of beaten resignation, but the final result of the realization that all things work together for good to them that love God. If we can really see, not just believe, that everything comes from God, then we can take anything. We can allow ourselves to be reduced to a lump of coal and then let the lump be squeezed in God's fist until it becomes a diamond. By undergoing this transformation in this darkest of times in human history, we will have participated in eternity's deepest self-actualization. We will have forged realizations and values and treasures and essences that no golden age could ever match. This is how take up your cross and follow me becomes my yoke is easy and my burden light. In the words of the Surah Al-Inshirah of the Noble Quran, have we not expanded your breast and lifted the burden that weighed down your back? Surely with hardship comes ease. With hardship comes ease. The book does not say after hardship comes ease, undoubtedly to indicate that the ease is already there somewhere in the midst of the hardship. The burden that is too heavy for us to carry is already being carried by Allah, just as we ourselves are being carried. When that burden finally becomes heavy enough to break the grip of self-will, the burden of self-will is lifted. That's the first one. The second meditation is called When God Makes Things Impossible. Okay. Sometimes God makes things impossible. Nothing works. No course of action is the right one. Everything is a contradiction. Even doing nothing doesn't work. He has presented you with an existential koan. You try to figure things out and the intellect goes into overdrive. It thinks itself into every possible imbalance and excess until it simply shuts down. This is what happened to Job when God allowed Satan to afflict him. Job's three friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Sophaz, appeared with every conceivable wise explanation and possible course of practical action, none of which were helpful, none of which were right. Job's response was, though he slay me, I will trust in him, but I will maintain mine own ways before him. Satan in the book of Job is like the mysterious master identified by the Sufis with the immortal prophet Khizr, the green man, whom Moses encounters in the Surah of the Cave in the Quran. Moses wants to follow him, but Khizr tells Moses that he won't be able to stand his company. Moses persists, so Khizr commits a series of apparent crimes that Moses finally can't put up with. He objects, and Khizr terminates their relationship. So it appears that Moses has failed the test of gnosis, of ma'rifah, remaining a mere exoteric rasul or law-giving prophet, not an esoteric or arif. But that's not the only way of looking at it, because it is only after Moses has drawn the moral line, in this case the line against the murder of an apparently innocent young man, that Khizr explains his actions. He has killed the young man because he knows that he was about to kill his own parents. If Moses had not been true to his prophetic function as a rasul, a lawgiver, if he had not drawn the moral line, then Khizr's actions would have remained mysteries. As it was, Khizr revealed to him his esoteric secrets. This is why we have both Sharia and Tariqah. If Moses had not maintained his own ways before Khizr, nothing would have been revealed. God would have remained in Moses' eyes an arbitrary and capricious tyrant, and himself a servant serving in perpetual fear, totally without hope. When God makes things impossible for you, he has great things in store for you. He is clearing your heart of everything that you think and forcing you to stand up as precisely who and what you are. Only when you are able to stand as who you really are will his real gifts to you, through that one unique person and that one unique and never to be repeated occasion, be revealed to you. This is one of the meanings of the hadith, he who knows himself knows his Lord. When you stand up as who you really are, then you are close to annihilation, to fana, because who you really are is poverty. You are the one in perpetual need. That is your essence. Only Allah is Al-Ghani, the rich. First, you may believe you are rich enough to solve your own problems. Then, when you realize that this can never be, you will begin to feel your intrinsic poverty and consequently believe that there is no way out. It is then that it becomes possible to remember, as never before, that Allah is Al-Rahman, the All-Merciful. What for you is impossible, for Him is easy. He is the solution to all problems because for Him no problem exists. You can never be someone other than who you really are. It is possible, however, to pretend to be someone or something else. If you are in a state of pretense, however, you can never meet God, who is Al-Haq, the truth. If your intention is to encounter and conform yourself to that truth, your own truth is the only touchstone that can bring this about. No false imagined self, no matter how falsely humbled, no matter how falsely exalted, can be annihilated in God. Only a true self can find a true death and true immortality. Therefore, you must thank whatever has had the power to reduce you to that true self as against all your flights and evasions, because it has opened for you the final door. In your true identity, all the virtues, which are attributes of God, and all the imbalances and inadequacies and transgressions, which are your own attributes when you believe you can exist independently of God, come together. Your own attributes can never be made equal to God's attributes. The only way you can become free of these knots and gaps and limitations is through annihilation of your separate selfhood. This alone is certain and able to produce certainty. It is precisely this annihilation of your own attributes that transforms you into an empty vessel ready to receive God's attributes. You are possible being, but God is necessary being. And the one thing that can transform possible being into necessary being is impossibility. The presence of necessary being to possible being, which can in no way encompass it, is precisely the impossible. Self-will must be renounced, yes, but seeing that it is impossible for us to will not to will, it can never be renounced until it is thwarted. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the deep, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy, said God to Job. I was in the nihil out of which you made me, was his unvoiced answer, and to which you have now returned me. Nihil being the Latin word meaning nothing. He who is nothing cannot see or act or even ask. He cannot defend himself or plead either innocent or guilty or even answer the summons to appear in that court. Consequently, judgment, finding no accused in the dock, can make no accusation, pass no sentence, but must return to the judge empty-handed. In no other way can the scales of justice be balanced. And when in this way they are balanced absolutely, then sovereign necessity, the tide of God's power, finds no barrier and so carries all before it, annihilates every impossibility, fills to overflowing every possible thing. If we had the power acting on our own to abase ourselves to this degree, we would rush to exercise it. But we are too weak to even begin such an operation. Only God can perform that kind of a miracle. Let us pray that He will do it soon. Let us also pray that our power to struggle against it will be quickly exhausted. So this ends with a poem. The sun is at rest in his own sky. Under our sky he flees through the hours. Let me start that again, I'm stuttering. The sun is at rest in his own sky. Under our sky he flees through the hours, sweeping the dials, setting and rising. The inconstant heart drives the sun through our days. But Allah outruns all our idolatry and our idols. Wherever He makes camp, He has already broken it. Love is swiftness, neither net nor trap can catch it. But love in His own chamber is repose. Where we are the moths, He is the lamp. Where we are the unbelievers, He is the faithful. As silence summons speech, so love drives longing until passion dies back into peace, as word into silence. The sun at midnight is equidistant from sunset and dawn. Then the flight of the arrow becomes the moth's orbit, and darkness itself, the army and the retinue of light. Okay. Well, this one is number 3, meditation number 3, to be known by the unknowable. This is the one I published in Parabola. It was quite a few years ago, but I note that it has the same style as things that I wrote 2 weeks ago. So, and this is a style that was never fully expressed in any of my books. Once in a while it goes in this direction. This is a kind of a genre of near prose poems, spiritual meditations that, start perhaps as metaphysical essays but go beyond that, and they're really all poetry of one kind or another, which is why I'm recording them, because poetry only exists carried by the medium of the human voice. Either the voice, your inner voice as you read it off the page, or the voice of the poet or the reciter as he recites it. You can't read poetry with your eyes. So you can only read it with your ears, if you will. To be known by the unknowable. The divine essence is totally indescribable. Every entity or being or event in the universe is nothing but one more attempt to describe it. If it were not for the unknowability of the named, the names would become gods, limited, literal, eternally at war with one another in the hopeless struggle to conquer the universe. And you yourself would be one of those names, those gods, by no means the most powerful, yet still doomed to go to war with all the others. This is why, according to Islam, one of the names of the essence, as it is in itself, is al-salam, wholeness, flawlessness, peace. To say the unknown is to say that what is not known nonetheless is. But how do we know this? No matter what direction we may look in, sooner or later, knowledge ends. What is beyond that end? The limits of knowledge expand into the unknown, and since what was all darkness a day ago is now filled with shapes and colors, those shapes, those colors must have been hidden in that darkness, we say. They were there all along, unknown yet real. But the real unknown is not provisional, a temporary blank on the map. It is unknown in its essence. It makes itself unknown. It is born forever from the unknown and forever returns to it. It is the void, filled with nothing that could be known. It is the intrinsic voidness of phenomena, guaranteeing that beyond all our knowledge those things are, proving that despite all our knowledge of them, those things are not things at all, but forms empty of form, signless in their mystery. That by which all things are known cannot be known in itself. The eye cannot see itself. This is the pledge that all the things we know are intrinsically free of our knowledge of them, just as we are free from the chains of that knowing, free in the very act of it. Great waves of knowledge break against the rock, but the rock remains unaffected, unchanged. The divine emptiness, unbreakable in its perfect non-resistance, is impervious to them. They rise and subside. The fascination of that emptiness, more beautiful than beauty itself, draws them. They are helpless in that fascination. They must rise and break again, forever, helpless to stop knowing and to stop failing to know what they can never know. The task is not to know, but to be known. But in reality, it is not a task. It is all that is. The task is to know this, and yet we can't know it. We can only be known by it. That's how we know it. The feeling, sharp as the scent of cedar smoke, solid as a rock in the hand, that you are known, seen, encompassed more completely than you could ever know yourself, is the very presence of it, the knowledge of it. To know that God cannot be known is to know God, Abu Bakr said. Kant called it the noumenon, the thing in itself, untouched by phenomena, intrinsically beyond knowledge. All knowledge testifies to it, all experience is experience of it, and nothing else, because there is nothing else. Where there is knowledge, there is ignorance. Where there is thesis, antithesis. Where there is proposition, dialectic. But where there is the unknown, there lies certainty. Don't contemplate the divine essence, say the Sufis. It is black. It cannot be contemplated. No statements can be made about it. Every conception of it is a lie. Contemplate the names of God instead, the intelligibles. Contemplate them until your soul is imprinted by them and conformed to them. But never try to contemplate the essence, or you will go mad. All you can do is forget it. It has already forgotten you. And yet, what is every name but a name of that essence? What else can be named? What else is named in the 18,000 worlds? Forget the essence and it forgets you. Forget yourself in the presence of it, and it remembers you immediately, holds you, has always known you. All things, all sentient beings, all forms are nothing but the infinitely various attempts of universal existence to describe the indescribable. What could it possibly be? What is it? In a way, it's a bird. But no, not that. In another and equally valid way, it's the sun. But no, not that either. In the truest way possible, it's actually a man, a speaking entity, a namer of every name. But as for itself, it has no name. Its name is silence. That silence in absence of which no word can be spoken, no bird fly, no sun rise, no man essay to know and exhaust his life in the quest for it, only to arrive in the end, at the end of all knowledge. Staring into that divine emptiness, that nameless blackness, forms arise, imaginations, conjectures, dreams. They keep being born because the unknown seeds them and draws them toward itself forever. They arise only because the unknown has no need to hold them, to own them, to lock them away jealously in the vault of its own emptiness. It is empty of chests and caskets, of keys and locks, of gold and silver, of greed and fear. It lets them slip from its grasp. Nature abhors a vacuum, but God loves it. And the lover of God, he also loves it. He delivers up his soul in the face of it. And the mystery of the unknown, the operative mystery of it, is that it can actually be practiced. It can actually be used. Tao becomes Te, and Te realizes Tao. How is this possible? How can nothing have a plan and a business and an outcome? Yet it really does. And I am here to say it. And I am here to say it. That I am here to say it proves that it does. That's its outcome. That's its business. That's its plan. And the whole practice is to die, to release in the face of it every conception we form of it, knowing that these conceptions can never reach it, never touch it, never speak its name. The forms and conceptions and conjectures keep on coming, the imaginations, the invocations, the dreams. How delightful confusion is when recognized as wisdom, Milarepa sang. The practice is simply to release every conception of the unknown in the face of the unknown, knowing these conceptions to be nothing really but notions of myself, shadows of the ego cast on the cloud of unknowing. To release what I have held myself to be, immediately holding nothing back, is to die, knowing that nothing comes after, knowing that what comes after is nothing. And when this is done, and when you, the doer, are also done, then those forms and conceptions and dreams and imaginations and conjectures are suddenly known, not as my hopeless attempts to grasp the unknowable, but as its supremely generous self-revelations to me and as me. Ibn al-Arabi in the Futuhat al-Makkiyah puts it like this. The recipient sees nothing other than his own form in the mirror of the reality. He does not see the reality itself, which is not possible, though he knows that he may see only his form in it. If you have experienced this, you have experienced as much as is possible for a created being. So do not seek to worry yourself in any attempts to proceed higher than this, for there is nothing higher, nor is there beyond this point you have reached anything except the pure, the undetermined, the unmanifest. In seeing your true self, he is your mirror and you are his mirror, in which he sees his names and their determinations, which are nothing other than himself. We read this, we feel we understand this, we think we know this, but in reality we know nothing. Rather, we are knowledge, knowledge plunging forever into the night of the unseen. The Sufis call her Layla, she whose beauty is maddening because it is invisible. All visible beauty contains an element of narcissism. We contemplate our own beauty in the beauty of what we see. But the beauty of the invisible is beauty itself. As the poem tells it, and this is a poem that's part of my epic poem called The Wars of Love. This is one little section of it. As the poem tells it, the greatest beauty is the beauty of the invisible. There is nowhere to turn to take hold of or behold it. Like a smell, it comes from somewhere beyond directions. You find it by being the place in which you've always known it. Layla, that's just what she's like. Her name has to be night, because the light of day, unless it falls on some mote of dust that thinks it has a name, is black as midnight. Night is Quran, night and all the stars. The stars are the book, but night is the mother of the book. She divests herself when the recitation is ended, undoes the strings of existence and drops it like a robe. When the lights went out in the great banquet hall where all the people I had ever known or ever would know were being entertained after dinner by the two black-faced fukara directing the spectacle of death and resurrection, that was her. Ever since that night, I have been a slave of the unseen beauty. It is madness to cross the ocean looking for the ocean itself, madness to find a direction that doesn't appear on either globe or compass and then turn toward it deliberately. Such things are not done. But when night comes and the wind drops and the calm ocean reflects the mazes of the stars, why not leave the cloak of your existence on the deck of the ship and dive in your madness into the glossy black water that has carried you for 75 years on the strict count of your breath and reach the midnight sun? Wow. If I start crying as I read this, I'll ruin everything. That's the worst limitation I have as a reciter of poetry is tears. My mentor as a poet, Beat Generation poet Lou Welch, he also had that problem, but he half solved it. He was able, when he was reading poetry from a page, he just bent his head down so that the tears would fall from his eyes directly on the page and not, collect in his eyes and blear his vision. So he was able to weep without sobbing, which is something I haven't really achieved yet. Usually I just have to cause myself physical pain, like drive a ballpoint point pen into my thigh as I'm reading to, keep me from sobbing. It sometimes works. So we get something that's a little bit more sober, perhaps, or maybe not. This is Meditation number 4, annihilation and a subsistence, beauty and majesty. The time comes to every spiritual traveler when there is simply no way he can present himself to his beloved, no mask he can put on that is acceptable to him. He is struck down by the majesty of God, the majesty inherent in God's very beauty. The idea that beauty is all mercy and majesty all wrath is wrong. There is mercy and wrath too, because it destroys everything that closes us to mercy. And there is majesty and beauty, because God's beauty is indescribably awesome. It's more than the soul sunk in passion and concupiscence can bear. In the words of the Song of Solomon, "Who is she that looketh forth as the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, terrible as an army with banners?" In the Hadith Qudsi, "Who seeks me, finds me. Who finds me, knows me. Who knows me, loves me. Who loves me, I love him. Whomever I love, I kill. Whomever I kill, I myself am his blood price." If he is the price for the one he kills, then the station being alluded to is not fana, annihilation in God, but baka, subsistence in God. The ego is obsessive self-definition. It says, I am this, I am that. It presents this or that to God. It asks, is this not sufficient for you? Or this? Is not even this sufficient for you? And the answer is always no, no, no. No self that we have created is sufficient for God, only the self that he has created. Every self created by him is a mirror to him. As soon as nothing appears in that mirror but he, as soon as that mirror is wiped clean of all that is self-created, then nothing takes place in the mirror of he but that one who once was me. To remain at the station of fana is to remain in the subtle desire not to exist, and to do so is to hold on to existence. But to submit to be killed is to submit to be created. Only if we totally submit to being created by God as he knows us to be, not as we fear or desire or conjecture ourselves to be, have we really submitted to be killed, and consequently passed from fana to baka, from wrath to mercy. Like Isis gathering the scattered limbs of Osiris, her beloved, he recreates us as we were created in the beginning. He brings us back to life with his divine breath. In the words of the Holy Quran, Arbery's translation, the words of Allah to the Prophet Musa, I loaded on thee love from me and to be formed in my sight. And this one, reborn, resurrected, and in paradise, this one now worthy to be loved by the beloved, is no longer me, but he. He is the one who stands behind my eyes and beholds. He is the one and only whom he beholds in the mirror of my form. He who is nothing now but the mirror of he. And in the whole transaction, I, me, am nowhere to be found. Jane and Larry may die and then come back, but you and me are gone, annihilated, snuffed out. Baka is not simply rebirth, a return from life after death, but a return from death to death in life and life in death, as Yeats put it, to a life that no death can threaten, to a death that no life can disturb, a death sealed by life, just as the life that seals it is a life sealed by death. The human form is the product of a divine narcissism. Allah admires himself in the mirror of his existence, and we are that image. That's why we bear the trust. For a human being to admire himself or herself like this is vanity. It is entirely in vain. But for Allah, self-admiration is absolutely effective. It is the power by which he shows himself via himself as Al-Shahid, the witness, as Al-Khaliq, the creator. Our only duty is to die in the face of the divine self-love by which he creates us, and let him make of us what he will. And let him make of us what he will. So I'm getting just before half done. Can I finish this in one sitting? We'll see. This meditation number 5 is called Adab in the Presence. It starts with a quote from Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali says, "Increase your fear of Allah while at the same time having a good opinion of him. The best of actions is to achieve a balance between fear and hope." The Arabic word adab means courtesy, comportment. As long as we envision God as a being separate from us, to whom we stand in relation, we must practice the correct adab in his presence. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, embarked on his miraj, his ascension from the rock on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem through the celestial spheres to the divine presence, he reached the station that the Quran calls the lot tree of the utmost boundary, nigh unto which is the garden of the abode. Quran 58:14-50. The lot tree most likely symbolizes the limit of what can be known about God by the self-limited human individual, beyond which lies nothing but his absolute unknowable essence. The Quran goes on to say, "When that which shroudeth did enshroud the lot tree, the eye turned not aside, nor yet was overbold." Quran 58:16-17. This is the root principle of adab in the presence, which is the origin of all other forms of adab. When the lot tree is witnessed without its shroud, the one witnessing it enters a state of rapture or intoxication where all sense of separate individual existence is lost. In a state like this, the question of courtesy, which has to do with respect for boundaries, never arises because all boundaries are now dissolved. As soon as the shroud returns, however, the sense of individual existence paired with its inseparable twin, the sense of the other, adab becomes mandatory. When you are in the presence of the absolute other, you must be vigilant to remain at the exact boundary between you and he, between the absolute and the relative, between what essentially is and what intrinsically is not. One might ask at this point, but how can we posit a boundary between the two poles of existence and non-existence? Since non-existence is not, how can it stand in relationship to existence? This is a very good question, one that foreshadows the station that the Sufis called fana, annihilation, the concrete and operative realization that nothing in fact exists but God. But when the lot tree is shrouded, then we are not yet or no longer at this station. And so we must remain either at the station of devotion, obedience, and submission, or else that of prideful rebellion and or despairing flight. When the Fatiha, Quran 1:6-7 says, "Show us the straight path, the path of those whom thou hast favored, not the path of those who earn thine anger, nor of those who go astray," the Quran is differentiating between two different forms of transgression. The path of those who have earned God's anger, and the path of those who have gone astray. In Quran 58:17, the ones who have earned his anger are those whose eyes are overbold. This is the ayat I quoted above. The ones who have earned his anger are those whose eyes are overbold, while those whose eyes waver are those who have gone astray. When you are in the presence of the king, it is impolite to gawk and stare, and equally impolite to become sleepy or distracted and forget where you are. What is required is to maintain a state of sober, humble vigilance and recollection, alert to any sign that the king wants you to draw nearer to him, or else to withdraw to a more respectful distance, and ready to act immediately and without question whenever that sign appears. When ravished by the king's beauty, Those who are addicted to states of spiritual drunkenness and intoxication will be tempted to fling themselves into his arms, while those who have suddenly become acutely aware in that presence of their transgressions and shortcomings under the influence of what the Sufis call the nafs al-lawama, or accusing self, will be tempted to flee headlong in shame and terror. Both responses are inappropriate. The correct adab is to remain in one's true and exact relationship to God at any given moment, conscious both of those factors in one's state and character that produce nearness and those other factors that dictate distance. If nearness conceals distance, we enter the state that the Catholics call presumption, whereas if distance obscures nearness, we are in the condition of despair. God wants from us all that we are. But if nearness drowns distance or distance overwhelms nearness, then we are acting upon and presenting to God only some of what he demands from us, offering him only certain limited elements or fragments of our character, only part of what we are. But if we can maintain the true ratio between distance and nearness, then we stand before God in our wholeness and have practiced the correct adab in his presence. Annihilation in God, fana, which is inseparable from subsistence in God, baka, is only possible when we present ourselves before him exactly as we are, empty of both false pride and false humility. Incompleteness, partiality, and fragmentation, whether pridefully expanded or shamefully contracted, are the signs of an egotistical attachment to self-will and self-existence. Whereas the kind of completeness that objectively and impartially admits both virtues and shortcomings is the doorway to annihilation and union. One or more sides of your nature, your emotions possibly, or your intellect, have passionately sought God and found him and been enraptured by him. But the sides of you that did not fully participate in that rapture only fell into the shadow of it. Part of you rose up to heaven, the rest of you sank down into hell. Before you can meet God as he truly is, however, and be fully annihilated in him, all these fragments of your psyche, high and low, must be brought together again in the center. And the location of that center, the site of the presence of God in the human microcosm, is al-qalb, the spiritual heart. As the axis of our total being, it is the synthesis of all the faculties. You cannot reach God through idealism, which is inseparable from the repression of the less than ideal. But if you put truth first, in whatever form it may appear, then you will see that God has already reached you. If you can accomplish this, then whatever in you merits distance will be transformed into repentance and purification, and whatever merits nearness will become all humility and gratitude. The individual self, the nafs in all its guises, is always involved with nearness and distance. But beyond repentance and purification, beyond humility and gratitude, lies the garden of the abode, where none departs and none arrives, where nothing subsists but the one presence, and the only adab is for what is to rest in the perfection of its own being. The Sufis sometimes say that Sufism is all courtesy, all adab. The perfect courtesy in the presence of absolute being is to renounce all claim to separate existence. Can I do one more? We will see. We will see. Maybe I'll stop after this. This is number 6. The rigor of grace. Rigor, hardness, difficulty. When what the Sufis call the hal, or spiritual state, the intensity of the felt presence of God, starts to deconstruct the ego, it will bring up all your old traumas, because trauma is the root of the ego. If you can objectively witness this ego, you'll see that it doesn't really exist. Ramana Maharshi says this. But the psychophysical traces of trauma are the very things you can't easily witness, can't bring yourself to calmly look at. Only when the ego, under the influence of the howl, becomes too hot to handle will all those traumas come up and, inshallah, be cleared. This, not trying to figure out in your head which old experiences are still hanging you up, is the real catharsis. Rumi says that the spiritual path first ruins your health, then brings you back to life. Why is this? The reason is that the ego, the self-concept, which is always based on the deep-seated unconscious belief that you have created yourself and must therefore maintain yourself in existence, necessarily becomes involved with and distorts the way your body processes life energy, which is ultimately from the ruh, the Spirit of God. The Spirit of God is your life. Spiritual energy, expressing itself in material terms through your way of assimilating nutrition, your habits of exercise, all the things that maintain your physical life, is now partly mediated by the ego. This means that when the Spirit of God begins to deconstruct that ego, your usual habits of physical functioning and energy use are disturbed. Your body and soul have to relearn how to receive life directly from the Spirit. And until they do, they are under stress. They keep turning to their old sources of life energy the ego has stolen from the Spirit, but now find them unavailable. They are like the jinn before the Quran arrived, who used to listen into the counsels of the angels, but now they find that way blocked and are driven out of the heavens by fiery meteors. Their proper teachers are now the book and the prophet, not their old psychic ways of learning things by stealing knowledge from the higher worlds. They must now receive knowledge and life directly, not secondhand. The jinn, as dwellers in the psychic world, are metaphors for the various elements of the unredeemed psyche. But of course, they are also real beings that exist in their own right. They are not dependent for their existence upon humanity. The ego, by definition, cannot deconstruct itself because it cannot become conscious of itself. In a way, the ego is its very unconsciousness of itself. On our own, we are unconscious and have to be unconscious of our deepest identifications and habits and attachments. These can only be revealed and deconstructed by a power that's greater than the psyche, by someone who knows us infinitely better than we could ever know ourselves through our own efforts. So much for Sigmund Freud and his friends. The spiritual gnosis of the psyche that the Sufis call ma'rifah of the nafs, the ego, the individual psyche, the self. In that, we know ourselves not through ourselves, but through Allah. He is the light of the heavens and the earth, while we, as soon as we submit to the annihilation of our self-will and self-concept, are the treasury of all the secrets of the heavens and the earth, as revealed by that light. That's why we hold the amana, the trust. It's hard for us to grasp exactly what it means to submit to Allah, to realize and act on the realization that we have not created ourselves and do not maintain ourselves, that He is the one who breathes for us while we sleep, who beats our heart, digests our food, thinks our thoughts. We imagine that submission to God is like a child's ability to cajole an indulgent parent or mollify an angry one. But in reality, it's more like a heavy boulder resting on the ground, or like sand that becomes wet when it rains and flies when the wind blows, like a corpse in the hands of a washer of the dead. That we could be as passive and insentient as a rock and still walk and think and breathe and make plans and fulfill responsibilities is a hard thing to conceive of. This is why the gradual or sudden lack of our usual feeling of self-determination that is produced by the dawning realization of our ultimate dependency on Allah can be very disorienting. Abandoning ourselves to God seems like the most dangerous and reckless thing we could do. much more dangerous and reckless than being a slave to our egotism and our passions, even though we know they will ultimately destroy us. Something like jumping off a cliff and then expecting just to hang there in midair. But the strange thing is, we do hang there in midair, as it were, because now we find ourselves resting on an invisible and protecting hand, one that, for all its invisibility, is soft as velvet and solid as bedrock, the hand of the friend. That hand is the ground under our feet, the earth we have always walked on, whether we knew it or not. The faster it moves, the solider and more motionless it becomes. Whether we travel to the east or west, there is the call to prayer, which I should answer after I finish this. Okay. It carries us by its own, start again. The faster it moves, the solider and more motionless it becomes. Whether we travel to the east or the west, it carries us by its own way to the perfect destination it has chosen for us. It is that destination. Where else could we possibly turn for help when there is nowhere else? In the tremendous velocity of its passage, all that could ever pass is already past. In its perfect stability and solidity and stillness, all that truly is remains and rests forever. Well, I've got time to pray, I think, and still finish this first. So this one, anyway, I'm going to go on. This is meditation number 7. It's called The Ultimate Blackness. It is in the form of a poem. It's written in verse lines. And subtitle says, written as if in the voice of God. This is God speaking. Is it? Well, in the context of the poem, at least, in a literary sense, on the literary level, this is God speaking. He says, until you do my will, I will oppress you. You think you're being oppressed by the world and its disasters, but this is not so. You imagine standing up to the world, changing the world to escape from its relentless contraction and abasement. But there is no escape in defiance, no escape from me. Next, you imagine capitulating to the world and allowing it to destroy you, because who can stand in the face of those omnipotent disasters, that relentless sabotage and cunning? But there is no escape in capitulation either, no escape from me in sacrificing yourself to the world you think you see. Lastly, you imagine your own self to be the oppressor, and so dream of standing up to it and transforming it, of capitulating to it and being destroyed by it. And yet there is no escape from me in this either, because who but your own supremely oppressive self could dream such dreams? No. Until you do my will alone, my oppression will never lift. And what is that will? It is obedience in contraction, obedience in abasement, obedience in annihilation. It is renunciation of expectation, sacrifice of all imagined outcomes, the end of the cherished illusion of the self-determined self, of the one chosen and instructed and empowered by God, the one who can turn even heroic obedience into the mask of rebellion. Not that, not any that is your Lord, but I alone. I am there in the blackness, in the black night of time, in that chamber where the lines of your silhouette and the motion of your hand appear nowhere at all. Is there power somewhere in that ultimate weakness? Is there healing in that sickness? Is there liberation in that cell of solitary confinement? Is there mercy in that dark night of the soul? Really? Is this the question you would address to me at the ultimate threshold? Do you really expect me to show you the outcome before the fact, slip you a clue, grant you a premature glance into the secret, A hint of the true answers that were written down before the world was made? A glimpse of the final score? Never. I will never do that, because I am an honest teacher and an impartial grader of tests. Until you step into that final night, you will never know. How can knowledge walk free of the exhaustion of its endless translators and commentators and petitioners and betrayers until no one remains to claim it? I can give you no answer to the question you ask because you are that question. The only way to ask it is to step beyond the threshold. Now, this ends with a note. Note, one indication of the highest trust in God, as well as of maturity and discernment, is to recognize the ultimate blackness not as a veil, but as a door. Okay. So this is meditation 8. It's called To Listen for Light, the practice of apocalypse at the end of the age. This is my coming out to face the world and see everything ending and see great powers being released and unveiled as the forms we have known dissolve, as they seem to be dissolving every direction we look. To Listen for Light, interestingly enough, is the name of a poem, title of a poem I wrote back in high school, Listen for Light. So anyway, to listen for light, the practice of apocalypse at the end of the age. When the whole earth descends into darkness, when the entire human race is lost in the shadow of despair, when every false hope openly displays and proves its intrinsic falsity, when each man and woman is forced to reveal the true idol that he or she worships and to live out the full consequences of that worship, this is the reign of Al-Dajjal, the Antichrist. This is the day when every idol bows down to the ultimate idol and pays tribute to him. This is the kingdom of smoke, the great singularity, the thick and palpable darkness. There is no breath of life, no light of knowledge in it. The ear is blocked from hearing even its own voice, much less the voice of any other living thing. The hand, even when held directly before the face, cannot be seen. The only way through the wall of darkness on that day is by a single question. By what light is this shadow, this darkness cast? And what is the name and the nature of the opaque object which interrupts that light, such that this impenetrable shadow is thrown like a net of hopeless paralysis over the whole world? The name of that light is God in the shape of Omega, the Messiah of the final days, the Christ of the Parousia, the prophet Jesus on the eve of the hour, the one who is also Maitreya, Kalki, and Saoshyant. And the name of the opaque object that blocks that light is Antichrist, he who is none other than the totality of the human ego, both inner and outer, both individual and collective. When the true light dawns, that ego completely constellates and rises up against it. René Guénon said, first, materialism petrifies the carapace of the world, Blake's mundane shell, making it hard and brittle. Secondly, cracks appear in that carapace, cracks in the downward direction, which open the door to the forces of the infrapsychic, to Yajuj and Majuj, Gog and Magog, as recounted in the 9th chapter of the book of Revelations, verses 1-3. I quote, And the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power. But in the third and final act, another crack opens up, this time in the upward direction. It is through this aperture that the rider on the white horse descends, the Christ of the second coming, along with his bride, the heavenly Jerusalem, who is the new heaven and the new earth. This opening is preceded by a powerful increase in angelic activity, which those who remain sensitive to celestial influences will be able to discern, indicating that the host of heaven, whose emblems are the wheeling stars, have arrived to do battle with Lucifer and his legions. Lucifer, who is the prototype of the collective human ego, now appearing as the archive of all the toxic psychic residues of the whole Manvantara, the entire world age now coming to an end. And this outward manifestation, and his outward manifestation, is Antichrist, Al-Dajjal, the deceiver, that world ruler who cannot stand in the face of truth, the one to whom love is a torturing fire. When the darkness is intense, when the lie is complete and established, when no light can be seen or sensed anywhere in this world, now is the time when the human soul can turn completely to the light of God, to Allah, who is the light of the heavens and the earth. When all breath and motion in the realm of earthly existence has become impossible, this is the time when necessary being can and must dawn, and will dawn, and has now in fact dawned. Now everything has become simple. Now there is nothing the heart can do but turn toward the absolute light. From Quran 2:257 says, Allah is the protecting guardian of all who believe. He brings them out of darkness into light. As for those who disbelieve, their patrons are the false gods who bring them out of light into darkness. These are the rightful owners of the fire, and that is where they will remain. First, this light appears as something like a smell, then as a voice, then as a penetrating brilliance. Whoever tries to stand against it will be overthrown by it. Whoever has a heart capable of fully prostrating to it will become a bridge for it from that world into this world, a road for it through the darkness of this world, capable of reaching the living center of every human soul. In the design of the human microcosm, the doorway of the absolute light, the way by which it and the angels who precede it can reach the heart, is the Brahmarandra, the aperture of Brahma at the crown of the skull. It is as if this higher opening were an ear through which God willing, you will gain the power to hear God's word for you and respond to it, the power to listen for light. Now, maybe there are actually 11 of these, not 10. I'll have to count this again. Anyway, this one, I mistakenly called it 8, like the other one, but it's actually 9. So this is number 9. It's called What is Forgiveness? Okay, it says, you and I, we warriors of the light who have gone to war against the forces of darkness, do not have the power to forgive. Only God forgives. All we can do by our own limited strength without God's direct help is to intend not to retaliate, not to strike back in anger, to forbear when one has the power to retaliate, to cancel a debt one is justly owed, may in fact be the literal meaning of forgiveness in the Gospels. Beyond that, no one but God has the power to change feelings of anger and hatred into love and compassion. But we do have the power to pray that He will do this. When faced with violence and enmity, let us not forget to exercise that power. As for Jesus' promise in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they shall be satisfied. Its inseparable companion is, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Sometimes our anger, especially when it expands beyond all boundaries and becomes bigger than we are, is based on our misappropriation of the wrath of God, to which we have no right and which is none of our business. And if, based on our own puny resentments, we place ourselves between the wrath of God and its destined target, hoping to throw our own little stone under the pile of divine justice, that wrath will roll over us like a tank. Our puny wrath is based on nothing but conceit and arrogance, but God's wrath springs from love. It is love itself which makes that wrath so devastating. Jesus said, "Love your enemies, do good to those who harm you, and you will heap coals of fire on their heads," because the ego's resistance to love is the essence of hellfire. Love is like the lion's tooth, said the poet W.B. Yeats. That fire would turn into cool, refreshing rain if those bound to the ego could only recognize it as the power of love. But the truth is, we have no power to influence the choices of the others. All we can do is renounce our own resistance to the power of love, then step aside and let it do its work. So here is 10. Yeah, there actually are 11. Okay. Now this is a poem in the sense that it is written out in lines. And the title is "What is God?" Subtitle, "The Dance of the Human Mind Before the Unknowable, the Dance of the Unknowable Before the Human Mind." And it begins with a quotation from the Munajat, which means the intimate conversations, the Munajat of Sheikh Ahmed al-Alawi. "My God, the worshippers do not worship you, no matter how much they worship. The Gnostics do not know you, no matter how much they know. The people of unity do not realize your unity, no matter how much they realize. The witnesses cannot describe you, no matter how much they witness." You have to start with that if you're going to try this. What is God? God is the divinity, the only being, and equally the only one who is beyond divinity and beyond being. The open field, the infinite ascent, the endless, ever-widening vertical path, elevation beyond elevation, openness wider than space, space more open and permeable even than the quintessence, infinity expanding without end, widening beyond endlessness, and also depth beyond profundity, the secret buried in the darkest heaviness of matter, coal crushed in the fist of the inner darkness until it becomes the diamond of absolute vision. If the one without root really is the one from which everything proceeds, into which everything returns, then it has no walls and no ceiling. It opens out behind into the infinite expanse, into perfect emptiness, emptiness endlessly deepening without motion or passage, absolute nothingness overflowing with primordial being, being eternally intensifying and concentrating like a star being born, till fusion is initiated and radiance begins, a featureless void streaming with light and power and self-transcendence, as its intrinsic emptiness reaches ever greater depths of annihilation, as its primordial blackness deepens and its secret becomes sheathed ever more deeply in the 70,000 veils of light and darkness which are its layers of dimensional existence. Existence which, empty of itself, does not even claim existence, but eternally surrenders it to the ever-deepening invisibility of its unknown origin, as its intrinsic perfection becomes always clearer and more sharply defined, as its primordial annihilation grows more and more radiantly incandescent, thunderous with the power of its own self-manifestation, spreading out like a nuclear shock wave in ever-widening rings of incandescent truth. Truth is zealously intent on concentrating and condensing so as to effortlessly become what it always was, a reality fully established on its own foundation, secure beyond all becoming, a presence that never passes but only arrives, that rests ever more deeply in its own perfect stillness, precisely by thrusting itself always more powerfully into the eternal motionlessness of the rock of ages, which is absolute immobility, moving so swiftly that no scale can measure it, till in the core of its perfect stillness it surpasses velocity itself, contracting itself, crushing itself together under the weight of its own infinite pressure, until it crystallizes into the shape of eternity beyond origin, into an ever more perfectly defined abyss of pure being, a being endlessly receding from us, plunging into itself, concentrating itself to the limit of absolute density and beyond, a density which is inseparable from its infinite expansion and attenuation, an expansion that is simultaneously a withdrawal, a shrinking into itself past the borders of the infinitesimal, past absolute dimensionlessness, till it surpasses non-existence itself, goes beyond even its own infinite and intentional act of self-transcendence. And all this strictly by the fact of its being no more or less than what it is, which is simply that it is. And out of it springs the tiny concentrated point of this self, the infinitesimal puncture wound that defines the whole field, defines this borderless universe of divine self-expression, encompassing every form, either necessary or possible, and every void between the necessities, and every bridge between the possibilities, and every impossibility by which the transcendent necessities are confirmed, and this in ever-widening echelons and immense branching hierarchical trees of life and knowledge, flowing always backward into the power of nothing that forms them and informs them, with no intent but the will to be both perfectly itself and empty of itself, just so it can seed them and give them life, and carve and craft them out of nothing but the truth of its own nature, till it leads them out from the night of time, so they can witness one another in the Mahasanga of universal manifestation, the great assembly of all the unique faces of the one who creates them precisely by transcending them, by shedding them like skins, then stepping cleanly apart from them, totally, instantaneously, beyond all intelligible motion, timeless as the lightning flash. This is why we see a God always looming out of his own darkness, Saguna Brahman out of Nirguna Brahman, Allah out of Al-Zat, a face to meet our faces. He looks out through our eyes, peers deeply alongside us into the featureless void where we search for him endlessly but never find him, because it was he who found us and founded us and named us and gave himself a name by which we could call him, and by the power of which he could also call us back to himself out of the wilderness of matter, energy, space, and time, back to the house where we were born, before there were ever tongues to speak or ears to listen, before there were ever ears to speak or tongues to listen. And all the stars, and all the galaxies, and the quasars, and the black holes, and all the folds and twists and currents in the fine grain of space-time are flowing backwards forever into the name that eternally names them out into manifest existence, and of which they themselves are the palpable echoes, those visible and audible names. What he is speaking right now in the day of existence, he is also listening to in the same now in the night of non-existence. We are nothing but words passing across his threshold from silence to silence. Who can name him? No vision takes him in, but he takes in all vision, says the Holy Quran. Only he has the power to speak his own name. But as for us, what might we be? The truth is, we are that name. Therefore, seeing that a name is something that is spoken rather than someone who speaks, for us to speak our own true names is unbecoming. It unbecomes us, takes us down into our separate components till finally it stores us away in the barns of the unseen, in eternal night, hungry for sunrise and pregnant with it. We are performing this act of unbecoming right now as we voice the single name we share with the one who first named us out into this wilderness, fading all the way back to the dimensionless point where all existence hid itself in impenetrable darkness before the name was uttered. This voice never dawned upon that darkness. These words were never said, which is precisely why they will never pass away, because into what could they ever pass? That is their warrant. That is their proof. So rest in the humming darkness, resounding with the voice of God. He alone is the one who will say what needs to be said, explain what begs to be explained, obliterate what longs to be obliterated, annihilate the darkness of the question and the light of the answer. This recitation is ended now. Its tents are folded. Midnight breaks over the earth of human speech. This one too ends with a note. Okay. Note, as for who is God, that's a different question entirely. What is God reduces him to an object contemplated by us human beings, by creatures whose perspective is inherently limited. Who is God, on the other hand, recognizes his power to contemplate us as well, and by his eternal contemplation of the human essence within him, to create us according to his knowledge of us. Who we think we are is all illusion and rebellion. Who God knows us to be is nothing other than al-haq, the truth itself. So I did get, this is actually 11. There are 11 meditations, not 10. I got to the 11, which I wrote just a couple of weeks ago. But it's funny, it's in the same style as things I wrote quite a few years ago. Although I wrote a lot of other things that are in different style, this is part of the same intrinsic narrative. This is meditation number 11, the last one, called The Final Blessing. And thank God it is short. No matter who you are or what you've done, God bless you. And if you elect to turn that blessing into a curse in your blindness or by your rejection, hugging the stone that will sink you to the darkest floor of the world's ocean, then so be it. The infinite ocean of love always ends at the white cliffs of justice, but never let the fear of justice prevent you from diving into the ocean of that love. By the power of illusion, love must always seem to depart from itself and finally betray itself, until justice, by the power of truth, the irresistible command of necessary being that what is be exactly what it is and nothing else, brings all things back to love at last, to the eternal darkness, to midnight pregnant with dawn in the secret chambers of the heart. Everything is one turn, like the universe is. Everything is the one dance that's danced forever by the pounding feet of God when he elects to change form to vibration, volatilizing the known to unveil the unknown. Form is who you think you are. When form goes up in smoke, this is God's final blessing. So receive it swiftly, you conjectural, self-imagined beings. Take it to heart, or it will pound against you. If you remember your sins, it will remember them too and hold you accountable. If you forget the sinner who committed them, it will remember only itself in you and no one else, because there is no one else. It is love alone that wipes the slate clean, fully expunges the record. So be sure. Thank you. That is my offering to those who were kind enough to make a contribution to my fund. So, Goodbye for now. We will undoubtedly speak again.